Ladies and gentlemen, Rear Admiral Brent Scott, Chief of Chaplains, will now offer our invocation.
I would invite you to join me in prayer. Ever-present Father, we ask that you would be in our company this day. May your unfailing provision for each of us be our example to follow as we break bread and enjoy the fellowship of this meal. We're grateful in this gathering for the vision and unquestionable commitment of so many at these tables who invest in the success of the men and women who go down to the sea in ships. Yet, in the face of all the technology that inspires us, it is the individual sailor, the Marine, Coast Guardsman we honor above all. A creation of another kind, the single seaman, the rifleman, and guardian whose heart and soul is clothed in non-negotiable and steadfast commitment. Be their protector. And we pray that in our service to you, we would remain faithful to pray for those who serve this day in far-flung places across the globe, those who pledge to uphold the values of honor, courage, and commitment, always devoted to them and to your claim upon our lives. Bless us, bless this meal, and bless our nation. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the CEO of the Navy League of the United States and 13th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Mike Stevens.
Just a quick announcement before we get started. My staff said we have so much gas left in the tank, we would like to extend the show out 2 more days, right? Did somebody just throw something at me? Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our national president, Dave Riley, and all the 30,000 members across the globe of the Navy League of the United States, we thank you for joining us for this year's Sea Air Space Luncheon, and it looks like a packed house. Unfortunately, this is the last event for Sea Air Space 2022. It has been the Navy League's absolute honor and privilege to host you, and we are more grateful for your attendance than words can express. So now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you today's speakers for our Sea Air Space Luncheon. And I gotta admit, I'm pretty excited about these gentlemen that are gonna be coming up and speaking with you. First, the 31st Chief of Naval Operations and the Navy League of the United States National Vice President and good friend, Admiral John Richardson. And I gotta admit, somebody that I'm just super proud to announce because we're so happy to have him as a senior leader at the Navy League, the Dean of the newly minted, remember this now, Center for Maritime Strategy, Admiral James Fogo. All right, thank you. Thank you. And if we would have known what we know now about how smart this person is, we might not have hired him because he makes everybody else look dumb in our organization, right? Or at least he makes me look dumb, right? And this is our moderator for today's panel, Dr. Stephen Wills, the navalist for the Center for Maritime Strategy. Steve. Thank you, David. All right. All right. And I will now get out of the way and let them take over from here.
Okay, please, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon for really what I think is going to be a great conversation with Admiral Richardson and Admiral Fogo. And we talked about this a little bit in advance, and what we'd like to do is first ask both of these gentlemen how their respective career paths and the geographies in which they did that helped to shape their outlooks, both at command at multiple levels, including being the Chief of Naval Operations and being Naval Forces Europe and Joint Forces Command Naples Commander. So what I'd like to do is start with Admiral Richardson. Sir, you've been primarily a Pacific Fleet submariner as opposed to being an Atlantic Fleet sailor, as Admiral Fogo has. Could you tell us how your experiences in the Pacific have sort of shaped your strategic outlook throughout your career and current events today?
Yeah, sure, Steve. Thanks,
Thanks, sir.
very much. And before I answer that question, I just want to take a moment and recognize a couple of really prolific things going on here. One, Chaplain Scott, Admiral Scott, gave the invocation today. I think you mentioned that you're 6 weeks out from retirement now. So if you think about the number of invocations that Chaplain Scott has given to be within 6 weeks of retirement, I think a nice round of applause for Chaplain Scott and his career of service. Yeah. And also at my table, or our table, again, was my very, very good friend, Admiral Carl Schultz, the Commandant of the Coast Guard. Carl, you and I, when we served together as a head of our services, just had the greatest time wrestling with the challenges of being a service chief. And I just wanted to thank you personally and on behalf of the Navy and everybody here for your outstanding lifetime of service. You and Don have just been magnificent at the head of the Coast Guard. I think, a round of applause for Admiral Schultz, I think, is terrific. Yeah. And Admiral Fagan, one table over, congratulations to you, man, for really, a milestone for everybody here, and just so well deserved. And congratulations and condolences on service chief. Yeah. And then I wanted to also just take a moment to recognize the Navy League of the United States for putting on this event. This is sort of the final pièce de résistance. We saved the best for last with Admiral Fogo here up on stage. But I think that the people that have come up to me in the past 3 days have just sort of in an unsolicited way said they've been to many, many, many sea, air, space events, but by far and away, this was the best one that they've attended. And if you think about, not only the quality of the speakers that were able to address, the operational situation, the political situation, the industrial situation, today, this event, the Navy League really stepped forward and made a statement, I think, in terms of their commitment to the power of diversity. The Women's Leadership Seminar was standing room only. We'll need a bigger venue for that next year, Mike. And the diversity event led by Admiral Harris was a milestone going forward. I think that Sunday's STEM event was just one for the ages. Just really took off, so much excitement there, and young people, and just something to behold, visually and everything else. All of that, I think, is the result of fantastic leadership. Dave Riley, the president of the Navy League, Mike, you and your leadership as the CEO, and then just the amazingly hardworking staff, remarkably small to put on such an amazing event. And so, please just give it up for the Navy League and for everything they did to make this available. Okay, and with that, I've forgotten your questions. So I think that we're all shaped by our experiences. And, most of my operational time, as Steve said, was in the Pacific, operating in that theater. Of course, as we get more senior, I think both Jamie and I would say that we've had plenty of time around the world, really. And so you kind of get this global perspective. But I think that, even while all eyes are riveted by what is going on, the atrocities that are going on and being inflicted on the brave people of the Ukraine. I think that we're also, everybody around the world is watching that right now, right? And asking the question, well, one, how can this happen, right? And one thing that this has demonstrated is that, yes, it can happen, right? I mean, if you think about, worst case scenarios, they can happen, right? And so we need to be thinking about that in terms of, what America, the United States, stands for in the world, and what we need to be doing to make sure that we're ready for something like that. And then I think, as you think about that, I mean, one, I think a lot of people are taking notes that this is a lot hard. It's hard to sort of invade and impose your will on a brave and loyal and fierce adversary that is just really not ready to give up, right? I mean, and that's, a purely lines of communication type of an effort, very, very difficult as we're seeing unfold before our eyes. I would argue even more difficult if you've got 100 miles of water that you have to try and traverse. And so I think that a lot of people are reevaluating their calculus in terms of, what does this mean? The coalition of the West, right? Everybody coming together, really taking our own side in this fight, not only from a military perspective, an economic perspective, but also, a political perspective and a value perspective. And so I think that, as I think about, how could this be viewed from around the world, I think a lot of people are taking notes along those lines.
Hey, thank you, sir. And for everybody here who's taken JPME 1, at least you'll know that the Russians helped to invent this kind of operational level of war and big sweeping movements of tanks and so forth. So it's somewhat embarrassing for them at a minimum. So not good for them, but better for us. Maybe they've invested more money in ships. And with that, I'd like to turn to Admiral Fogel for a minute. Admiral Fogel has been primarily a Land Fleet submariner, so a slightly different career, different geography, and he's encountered Russian submarines from time to time. So Admiral, what, based on your career, has shaped your thinking, and particularly as you've had to deal with the Russians at multiple different stages in your career?
Tell us about those Russian submarines you encountered.
Yes, sir, we'll do it. It's great to be up here on stage with my friend and my boss and my CNO, Admiral John Richardson, and Steve as a moderator today. So thank you, sir, for being here. So my formation as a naval officer really goes back to the start of my career, about the same time as John. He was class 82, I was class 81. And both of us in the submarine force, although in different theaters. As he said, he was out in the Pacific. I was in the Atlantic. And if you all could put up that, I have one picture slide for you. On the left, you'll see my first boat. And that was an interesting boat. And I'm circled in both pictures. As a Navy lieutenant, surfaced on USS Sea Devil in the North Pole. Fairwater planes up just like a tin can. We broke through. That was the middle of the Cold War. And that was under a famous commanding officer named Commander Rich Meese, who retired as Admiral Rich Meese. He was STRATCOM. He's a friend of John's, and he lives here. We see him all the time at the Submarine League events. He's in that Royal Navy turtleneck because he studied at Oxford. And he was dashing, and he had gray hair as a commander. He has gray hair now, but what a great guy. And he raised his wardroom to be responsible and ethical and to do the job. And fleet average was okay. And it was a great boat and a great start for me as a nuke and ultimately as a weapons officer before I left that ship. But we were patrolling around. We did a couple of deployments up north and in the Mediterranean. And from that ship, and I think Mark Kenny's out there somewhere in the audience, he was walking off the bow as I walked on. We had 6 flag officers. We had Admiral Meese, Admiral Phages, Admiral John Byrd, Admiral Bill French, Admiral Kenny, and I was the runt of the litter. Before I left, a Commander Stanhope came for a ride up north with us for his kiddie cruise, and he later became the first Sea Lord. And I stood watch as Lieutenant J.G. Fogo on the mid-watch, because Byrd always put me on the mid-watch, with Quartermaster Second Class Rick West, who was MCPON number 12 and joined us for a number of the events here. So a pretty cool ship to cut your teeth on. As I said, the middle of the Cold War, running around after submarines up north, and that was in 1985. A 16-year hiatus later, a lot of things had happened. We'd gone through the Cold War. It was a cost mitigating strategy, and we'd taken down the USSR. And in John Lehman's book, Oceans Ventured, there's a part about Gorbachev telling Akrameyev to pull your forces back because that 1986 strategy really pressurized the Russians. And without a shot fired, we cracked the backbone of the Soviet Union, and it fell apart. That was not the end of history that Francis Fukuyama wrote about in the early 90s. It was merely a pause. And what transpired after that was a little bit of a reset. I think the government lost focus on the threat. And as we moved towards the year 2000, I was back up in the ice cap, the polar ice cap on USS Oklahoma City. Sadly, we're going to decom her in the month of May. I'll be out on May 10th in Bremerton. But that's Oklahoma City, my command tour on the right. I think you're right. And that wardroom was another great wardroom. 2 flags, Rick Seif, Rob Goucher, and probably a third coming along on the next board. But a lot of things had changed up north. And Sink Harris asked Pappy Paparo a question the other day about climate change. It's not trivial. It's a big thing for this administration. In between those 2 runs, what we noticed was a lot less ice, a lot more blue water. We came up in a polynya, and that's an open area of water for those of you that are familiar with the term. When I got up topside, everybody came out, and it was enlightening for 75% of the crew that had not been blue noses until then. And we looked in the water, there were plastics everywhere, bags, bottles. I was shocked. I said, how'd that get up here? Well, Gulf Stream, it takes it up. So we have environmental concerns too. And the other thing is, that was Lance Subazwek's 2001. The Russians were back, and they came back with a vengeance. And as we move through time and I returned to the Pentagon, I've done about 12 years underwater, about 12 years in the Pentagon, almost like being underwater in my life, and 12 years overseas. The Russians were back. And I had the pleasure of working for Mike Mullen in 2007. And he said, the first thing I'm going to do is talk to the Russian Chad. So we flew over to Brussels and met Yuri Balievsky, a bowling ball of a man. He looked like Nikita Khrushchev, and the actor that played Khrushchev in Enemy at the Gates. Short of banging his fist on the table in the NATO-Russia Council, he was very rude, very condescending, and Admiral Mullen was going to invite him for a counterpart visit. I had the envelope. He said, give me that back. I'm not inviting him. And I said, nah, I think you ought to. And he goes, all right. So he did. And Balievsky came over, and they actually hit it off. And they had a conversation, and Balievsky said, stop the encirclement of Russia, or we're going to pull out of the Conventional Forces Europe agreement. That's transparency. That tells us what their exercises are and what they're doing. That was the first step in the boiling frog scenario that gets us to today. And then rapid fire after that, Mullen thought he had a relationship. Balievsky was replaced by a new Russian Chad, Makarov. He invaded Georgia. That was a very tense period of time. Both governments decided we needed to do something different. So we had a reset. Remember Hillary Clinton and Lavrov hitting the button? That reset lasted for a while, and I went back to the theater, and we actually did ball tops with Russian Rapuchkas in the Baltic Sea, those ships that are now attacking Ukraine. So I thought, well, maybe there's something to this reset. We had a work plan that was signed by both chiefs of defense and ministers of defense all year, activities all year. Harry Harris was forced to march in a parade in Murmansk and get a medal for it. He didn't like that at all. And you can ask him about it. That's a memory that he often brings up. But then 2014 came along, and Putin had his debutante ball at Sochi. And what happened? The Maidan Revolution. He was furious, and he invades Crimea. And then all bets are off. There's sanctions, and things start to go downhill. And what do we see in the Black Sea? We try to help. We go over. It was a perfect time to flow lethal weapons. We didn't do that. We awarded excess defense articles in terms of some of Commandant Schultz's Coast Guard cutters that were in Baltimore. John knows Admiral Voronchenko, who was the Ukrainian CNO at the time. He came over and shopped those boats, took the best of breed, and we flowed 4 of them to the Ukrainians, but with no weapon systems on board. We stripped the forward gun. That was not a decision by military people. That was a policy decision. I'm here to tell you that was a mistake. Now, the Ukrainians, they wanted a Navy back. They trained hard. We helped them with exercises. The largest sea breeze exercise last year in terms of about 30 ships. And we started to see this boiling frog scenario get hotter and hotter. The Russians challenged the Ukrainians with lawfare, closure areas all throughout the Black Sea. Then the Ukrainians returned that challenge with their Mosquito fleet. And back in 2018, they were bumped, shot at, taken prisoner, and held in the Amnesty International's worst dungeon in Moscow and traded 2 years later. You remember that situation. That was Admiral Voronchenko before he ended his watch. So it was no surprise to me when we ended up where we are today with Russia invading Ukraine. And folks, I got to tell you, as a naval officer, I'm disappointed that we have lost sea space. We've lost the Sea of Azov, which is not as big a deal as the fact that we may have lost the Black Sea. There are no American warships in the Black Sea. We had 3 in December. Now, probably not a good idea to send a U.S. destroyer charging in there right now with the Hornet's nest spun up. But we got to get back in there. That's what we do in freedom of navigation. That's what the UN Convention on Law of the Sea is all about. And we should not be deterred by tyrants. And so what do we need to do that? We need a big Navy. I'm not saying 600 ships. I kind of liked what Admiral Gilday said in San Diego at West when he said 500, 355. That was John's number when he was CNO, and about 150 unmanned. I think there's a huge debate there that we're going to talk a little bit about today. But we need a force structure and a capability that can push back against this aggression. It's not just the Russians. It's the Chinese, the violent extremists, North Korea and Iran, and who knows what else is out there. So let me pitch back to Steve. That's kind of the way I grew up and the way I think.
Thank you very much, sir. And the question of ships is a good time to turn to Admiral Richardson again, sir. As CNO, you crafted that 355 ship plan, put a lot of work into that. It was signed into law by Congress. That was your job for 4 years as well, sir. Could you tell us about your experiences in doing this?
Sure. Now, what we did, in fact, many of you might have been involved in that deriving that 355 number, because I wanted to get, just ask the question really of think tanks, my own team in the Navy and others. Do we have the Navy that is required to meet its responsibilities to the nation, given what we were doing internationally? And at the time, I think we were about 270 ships in the battle force ish. And the resounding answer, the unanimous answer from everybody that we asked was, well, no, we need a bigger Navy. And everybody had a little bit of a different perspective on, what that Navy should look like, right? And it was great because we got all sorts of things to think about. But, sort of the center of mass number, if you will, was in the mid 300s. So at 355, it was almost like a mathematical average. So it wasn't anything organically grown. It was really the consensus of navalists and historians and theorists and everything that we just needed to get building, right? And then it was a matter of putting that together. Now, I can sympathize with Admiral Gilday, perhaps in a unique way, because what I sensed his urgent message is that he's trying to convey a sense of naval power, right? What do we need as a nation in terms of the naval power that we should deliver again, so that as a maritime nation, our Navy can execute its responsibilities. And naval power, I think, has a number of different components, and it's a bit of a more complicated discussion than just a single number. Platforms, for sure, are part of that, right? Whether it's ships, if you're going to influence behavior, you got to be there, right? And you are there by virtue of the number of platforms that you can put together. And it's not just ships, of course. It's aircraft and submarine, the whole thing, right? And so that's one dimension of naval power, I would say. But another very important dimension of naval power is the systems that we put on those ships. And so, many in this room are involved, not only with building platforms, but, some of those exquisite systems that go on those platforms to make them capable. What about the network that stitches that whole force together and how, we heard a lot about that, JADC2 and what that's going, how do we command and control and integrate this force that will be operating in a distributed fashion? That's a unique dimension of power. Of course, all of it is executed by our people, right? And so, our sailors, our sailors and our Navy civilians, that whole cadre of people, and through the industrial force, we're seeing how important that is. And then you've got our operational concepts and our logistics, right? So all of these things, I think, comprise naval power. It's actually pretty easy to buy ships. Right? It's something that you can get your mind around pretty easily. You can put together the SCN account. We know where to go to buy ships. We probably need a lot more people to go to buy ships to really have the full industrial power as a maritime nation that we want. But that's relatively, that's the first step, right? That's the bones of a powerful Navy, I think. But the muscle and sinew and skin and everything else, it's those other things that you put on those ships. And those move at different time scales as well, right? So platforms are around for decades, and our acquisition system is kind of tuned to this decadal type of a tempo. But if you think about the systems that are on those ships, that kind of moves at Moore's law speed, right? That's 3 to 5 years. And so when you think about things that the private sector has done, hey, we're going to communicate completely with APIs, right? And anybody who doesn't do that is fired. Okay, that allows all of those systems to move and plug in, true plug and play type of capability. So there's an acquisition system that moves at kind of maybe a 5-year time constant. And then of course, the newest thing on the block is software. And software moves at a DevOps time constant, which is, hundreds of releases per day in the top running organizations in the world. And so that's a separate time constant altogether. All of them contributing to naval power. I think CNO Gilday is wrestling with all of this, right? And the department is wrestling with all of this as we really transform not only the operational part, delivering naval power, but the nation's people, that educated workforce that's going to come forward, inspired and educated. And then the industrial power as well to deliver those things at a relevant pace. It's a true transformation, and you can just feel, in fact, we talked a lot about it here at Sea Air Space. You can feel that getting moving, but it's a big beast, and it's got a lot of momentum, a lot of inertia. We all need to be pushing on that as hard as we can.
Thank you very much, sir. And in discussion of people, a quick reminder, if you have a question, please tweet your questions to that hashtag that's been put up at SAS Lunch. Thank you. And with that, gentlemen, what I'd like to do next is go to some of your closing thoughts that you'd like to leave us with, specifically in regard to anything that we've left out here at Sea Air Space, maritime strategy, operational art, anything else you want to talk about. Admiral Fogo, let me go with you first, sir.
Sure, yeah. I'd like to springboard off what Admiral Richardson said about naval power, and I couldn't agree more, sir. That sentiment was with you when you were in the Office of Chief of Naval Operations, and had the pleasure of being back in the Pentagon and being John's DNS for about a year. And, he already come up with the idea of 355, and then how do we get the most out of that to make a 355 ship Navy look like a 600 ship Navy. And so I do subscribe to what the Secretary and what Admiral Gilday has said during this conference, is that even with numbers in decline for the interim period, we can maximize capability and use that as a force multiplier for our fleet. John mentioned networks. I've been out to see Admiral Doug Small in San Diego at NIWC, and all of the discussion of overmatch and JADC2 has been kept under a pretty close hold. So, in doing my own research and figuring out, you got to be able to talk about this stuff in public, because people want to know, well, what is it? What are we doing? What's different? Why is it something that we should invest in. And actually, if you want to learn something new, Matt has said this, read an old book. So I picked up my copy of Peter Singer's Wired for War, because I remembered something in there that reminded me of JADC2. And then as I thumbed through the book, I found it. There's a chapter on Admiral Art Zabrowski, incredible guy who was at the Naval War College and recruited by Rumsfeld to come down to the Office of Net Assessments. And it was network-centric warfare. And John, I know you were passing through the Pentagon and JIFCOM at the time, and I was doing the same thing in my 12 years underwater in the Pentagon. And I can remember network-centric warfare coming up almost every day that Zabrowski was around. And Singer describes it. And the way he describes it is kind of the same way that we talk about JADC2 and Overmatch. It's getting inside the enemy's OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, and act. And acting before he even knows that you knew that he was there. If you heard Hazel Heckel the other day, he hates the term left to bang. We always say get left of the kill chain. So if you can figure out where the enemy is, and it's probably going to be the Chinese because the pacing threat and menacing threat is out in the Pacific, before he knows that you know that they're there, and then you can strike and take away that capability and surprise him with it, that's going to have an impact on the off-ramps to hostilities. And if deterrence fails, what you want to do is try to find those off-ramps early and end the war. So I think there's something to this overmatched JADC2. And at the same time, I got to say, and I think, John, you'll agree with me, we've been doing this for a long time in the United States Navy with NIFCA on carriers and the E-2Ds and over-the-horizon targeting and using unmanned systems. In fact, Admiral Woody Lewis, when he was the strike group commander on Theodore Roosevelt, brought the strike group to my theater. I was 6th Fleet Commander, and demonstrated NIFCA for the first time with those new platforms over there. And the Brits were taking notes. They were very impressed, and it worked well. Most recently last year, we had a shot of an SM-6 over the horizon by USS John Finn that was cued by an unmanned system. You've heard a lot about the MQ-25. It's not just a refueler. That is a system that has incredible possibilities and opportunities for payload that can take us over the horizon. This is all going to be about long-range fires in the future, particularly in the Pacific. But what we got to get on with is we got to get on with our own hypersonic weapons development program, long-range fires, and then figuring out how to make our carriers invisible. We have some bills to pay. I do not begrudge at all, and even though I'm biased, the Columbia-class program, it's an expensive program. I think the Navy tried to get the interagency to pay for some of that. They tried really hard. John, you tried very hard on that. And but it's our bill, and we're going to have to pay for it. So I think as shipyard learning curves come in, we're going to see the cost of that platform come down. And it's absolutely necessary, and probably more so now in April of 2022 after we've seen Putin saber rattling with the nuclear card. So we've got to have a credible deterrent. And I was also happy to see the administration back away from a no first use policy. I don't think that would be in our best interest at all. I'm excited about Task Force 59, the unmanned systems that are out there with that brilliant guy, Vice Admiral Brad Cooper. You know, some guys get all the luck. He's a good-looking guy. He's got 5th Fleet. He's got Task Force 59. He's having the time of his life, and he's doing a great job. And so I know we're going to develop warfighting doctrine and CONOPS using those systems to get to that goal that Admiral Gilday has told us about of a 500-ship Navy with 355 from Admiral Richardson's era and 150 unmanned or hybrid systems that are going to make for an unstoppable force of the future. I'm a big fan of Steve's. He's come on board the Center for Maritime Strategy, just off writing a book with senior John Lehman. It's the 2nd edition of his carrier book, and in the last chapter, you talk about hybrid warfare and unmanned systems. And I thought that was very interesting for Secretary Lehman to get his teeth into that with you in the book. And you have a few copies of the book. It's available if anybody wants one. But those are kind of my parting thoughts, and back over to you and John for yours.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I gave away most of the copies while I was here. I have a few left. It was popular. Admiral, closing thoughts.
Maybe just some closing thoughts if I could zoom out a bit. First of all, I agree with everything that Admiral Fogo said. In this room, I think that everybody in this room has probably given a great deal of thought and is completely on board with would agree with the statement that the United States has always been and remains a maritime nation, right? So I don't want to take that for granted. Just please raise your hand if you think the United States is not a maritime nation, okay? Can I just see a
Not in this audience.
show of hands here? All right, good. We had security standing by to usher you out. But no, I think that, so we're all on board with that, right? And the discussions that we've had here at Sea Air Space have been, I think, taking that as a given, right? And so with that as a given, we can dive down below the wave tops and get into the deep discussions that are so rich, with leadership amongst ourselves, et cetera, to move this forward. But once this is the final event. It's over after this. We're all going to go back to our communities and homes, and it's not the case out there that there's this firm belief or maybe an understanding of the United States as a maritime nation. What does it mean to be a maritime nation, right? That our prosperity and our future, our strategic future, is bound to the seas. And so I would just ask all of you to be advocates or apostles, go forth and don't take it for granted that everybody has the same deep understanding and belief that you do. We need to get out there and communicate this in terms that everybody can understand. We're our nation's prosperity and security, our diplomatic element, everything is bound to the seas. And it's the recent crisis and the pandemic have put an exclamation point on that for us, because we see what it means to be denied sea lines of communication, right? When that gets to be challenged, whether it's just from resources, right? The supply chain that everybody is we're feeling the pressure and the tension and disruption in the supply chain for a number of different reasons, and it's having an impact on your household, right? If you've ordered a major appliance lately, your wait time is a lot longer, and if we're paying a lot more for materials at the household level, right? And so we've got this this opportunity, I think, to communicate to everybody around us in every opportunity, figure out a way to highlight the fact that we are a maritime nation. Our security, our prosperity is tied to the seas. We need a strong maritime force represented by all of these flags behind me to do that. And we need a strong maritime industrial base. And this is also something that makes Build Back Better, Make America Great, whatever you want to use as your slogan. It increases America's strength in the world and allows us to converge on the ideals that we stand for in the world and take our own side in this fight. So I just encourage you, as you file on out, consider yourself an apostle and go forth and convert everybody that you see in terms of instilling this belief in them. So,
Steve and
Go
John,
ahead.
if I may just
Please.
piggyback, sir, on the last comment there. I don't want to be parochial, but I'm going to be parochial because I'm retired now. So, we got all these think tanks around town, the Billy Mitchell Institute, the Association of the United States Army, and the Center for Maritime Strategy. I think we're going to see a bump from this situation that's taken place in the Black Sea and Ukraine for the foreseeable future in the future years defense plan. We're going to see money go up. We're at $767 billion right now. It's an astronomical number. That's a lot of money. Some say, well, we need more. I say, no, it's how you program that money. It's how you distribute that money. This is the maritime century. It's 100 years celebration of the American aircraft carrier. Mike and I agreed that our overarching theme would be the maritime century. And in the maritime century, that money should be biased to the maritime services. So I'm a big fan of breaking that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 allocation of resources and feeding more into the maritime. And I hope we see that in the future. And we'll certainly advocate that at the Center for Maritime Strategy. And rest assured, Carl and Linda, maritime includes the Coast Guard and our merchant mariners. If Captain Conrad is out there from G Captain, a good job there. So you got a question in on every one of the panels last week. So it's always nice to see you at the podium. So thank you.
Jamie, it also includes all of our allies and partners, right? So,
Yeah.
so many of them here at Sea Air Space. And so I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that we're all in this together. We're arm in arm with everybody, all of the maritime nations that are around the world. We've never fought alone, right? Our prosperity is linked to their prosperity. And so this is a team thing going forward. So to all of our international partners who joined us here today, thank you very much for taking the time and traveling and being part of this discussion.
And thank you, sir. And we got a couple minutes for some questions. So thinking about the maritime century, our first question comes from Admiral Sankaris. Thank you very much, sir. He asked, as we are living in a maritime and space century, so space as well, should the Navy take the lead in the generation of the concept of integrated deterrence? And how might we undertake that? So, Admiral Richardson, do you want to take a stab at that one?
I'm going to let the Dean take a stab at that.
Absolutely. So, we had Dr. Mara Carlin in for the CMS Symposium Breakfast on Tuesday, and she talked about the National Defense Strategy and integrated deterrence. Integrated deterrence really tied hand in hand, hand in glove with campaigning. This is about a whole of government approach, including, and thank you, John, for reminding me, all of our allies and partners all over the world, because if we didn't have the liberty of going into your ports, and I'm looking at Admiral Haslam here from Sweden, we would not be able to do what we do. That's our one belt, one road, relying on other government agencies to help us. Over in Europe, we had three-letter intelligence agencies. The FBI was over there, law enforcement was over there, drug enforcement over there, just like down south in Southcom with JIADF South. And so this integrated approach with allies and partners, whole of government, and I submit all of you in industry as part of this team. We will not continue to have the kind of prosperity and economy that we enjoy right now, particularly with all these threats and these new threats, without national security. And so it's just so important. So I think that integrated deterrence it's a joint fight sink, but boy, I see that crown jewel of the fleet, the aircraft carrier strike group, as the lead sled dog in this fight for our national security and integrated deterrence, because that 90,000 tons of diplomacy, as you've heard, can go anywhere in its sovereign U.S. territory. It can go anywhere for freedom of navigation. It can go anywhere to deter, and it can go anywhere to fight, and it packs a really lethal punch. So I think we're in pretty good shape in the United States Navy when it comes to integrated deterrence and policy.
Hey, thank you, sir. And I've got one last question. I have time for one more. And as submarine warfare officers, I think you can certainly talk to this one. From Greg Jones, as former submariners, would love to hear from both admirals' comments on AUKUS and what it means for the situation in the Western Pacific.
Since I threw that last one,
Absolutely,
I feel
sir.
obliged to take this one.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, so now, I mean, first of all, I think AUKUS is potentially perhaps the most significant strategic motion to happen in the post-Cold War environment. If you think about the level of commitment that's going to be required, and as I've had the opportunity to talk about it, I would say, think of how hard this could be, the hardest possible course of action. Multiply that by 10, and you're starting to get into the neighborhood of how this is going to go down. We really need a level of commitment to make this work. And so if I'm one of our adversaries, I'm probably just biding my time, watching to see how this thing progresses, because there's a very, very real possibility that this thing just collapses under its own weight, right? And so we all need to realize that this is going to take, all of us putting our shoulder into the wheel and moving through. And when we get, to the first speed bump, we're going to have to push through that, right? And so a long-term dedicated effort to bring this about. But I think also it's representative of a number of, let's call them informal security arrangements that are arising in around the world, but particularly in kind of the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific theater, right? So if we think about AUKUS, there's one. There is the Quad, right, which is beginning a tremendous amount of attention with the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. There are a number of trilateral arrangements, right? We've got maritime trilateral agreements with the UK, the French, and the United States. That seems pretty natural. We also have one UK, Japan, and the United States, which on some level seems natural, but that's that's a geographically dispersed arrangement, and so all of these informal security arrangements, I think, are a message that that is sort of a common consensus about the value of the current world order, current rule set that governs international behavior on the seas and beyond. And we're seeing these informal arrangements spring up, requiring some significant commitment in both operational exercises, working together, industry working together, our people working together. And so I think that I'm encouraged by these things because they are coming together in response to something. But we all need to just be mindful that it's going to be a big effort to pull it off. So let's all work together to make it happen.
Absolutely, sir. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. I'd like to thank both Admiral Richardson and Admiral Fogo for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of the program today, and thanks for coming. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.